Man, I was so excited to get this episode off the ground. I almost forgot about our intro video and everything. Welcome in to the RotoWire Fantasy Basketball Podcast presented by DraftKings Pick 6. I am your host, Brandon Kravitz, on very few hours of sleep, joined by RotoWire analyst and NBA encyclopedia. He is Nick Whalen. Coming up on today's pod, we've got it all handled for you. We got the bounce, which is so get your questions in there to wrap today's episode. We'll get to a bunch of them, so fire those away in the comments section. And we'll touch on tonight's 4-game slate as well. Week 1 is in the books. Last night was thrilling for yours personally. We will get to all of that in just a moment. But how we living, Nick?
We're living good, man. We're living good. This is one of the best times of the entire sports calendar. If you're a baseball fan, if you're a basketball fan, if you're a football fan like I am, Lord knows I don't care about hockey. But if you happen to be someone who also cares about hockey, congratulations, you got that going on. But really fun first week in the NBA. It feels like we have a decent amount of parity right now. You got Cleveland and Orlando and Boston sitting at the top of the East right now. Obviously, OKC 3-0. In the Western Conference, but Detroit and Utah are the only winless teams a week into the season, and very excited to see how these standings kind of shake out and change night to night. A lot to talk about from last night's slate. We got to start though with your Orlando Magic, man. Paolo Banchero, 50, 13, and 9. And I was telling you before we got started, it's somehow a disappointing 50 because the guy had 37 at the half.
Yeah. 0 of 6 in the third quarter. Yeah. So water tends to find its level in the NBA. We were definitely was on the broadcast last night at the arena. It was the most incredible Magic performance that I've ever seen personally. I've worked with the team for 7 years, and this blows all of the other ones out of the water. What he did in the first half, he couldn't miss. I mean, that hoop. Mm-hmm. That hoop must have looked like the size of the Atlantic Ocean to him. He was shooting from everywhere, and he was scoring in every which way. Threes, step backs, fadeaways, drives to the bucket, those grown man moves where you're just kind of like a running back running through traffic, bouncing guys off of you. It was a dazzling performance. But the thing that is most impressive to me, and the fantasy managers that are listening to this will like this as well, this wasn't a Cam Thomas 50. This was a well-rounded effort. 13 rebounds. So he not only did he obviously lead the team in points with 50, he had 13 rebounds. That led the team. He had 9 assists. That led the team. He had 2 blocked shots. That led the team. And he had a steal on top of it as well. So you really got a little bit of everything from Paolo in that performance, and he was gassed. It was I think the recipe that kind of led to that, Nick, was the fact that you had Indiana on the second night of a back-to-back. They just gave up 45 to Tyrese Maxey, so they were chasing him all around the court just a few hours ago. And Franz Wagner was ill coming into the game. He tried to play, but wasn't able to make it through. They wound up taking him out after halftime, and Paolo just put the team on his back and was hot. So all of that cauldron made for a pretty special night.
Yeah, I mean, for any player to have that kind of night scoring-wise, there needs to be a confluence of events. For example, Franz Wagner not being able to essentially play after the first quarter. So it's like, all right, now you basically have to do all the scoring. It was, Banchero and Suggs who completely carried the offense, accounted for 75 combined points, 6 of 13 from 3, by the way, for Jalen Suggs last night. You also need a bad defensive team like the Indiana Pacers. And you also need the game to be close enough that the guy can justifiably continue to shoot and continue to pile up points, right? It's like you can't be up 20 going into the fourth quarter because, then the unwritten rules of the game come in where it's like, well, it wouldn't be very cool of you, to continue piling up points. Like, I feel like we've seen that so many times. Probably not that many, but 2 or 3 times where Klay Thompson has had these like ridiculous games through 3 quarters. And then the Warriors are up so much that we can't really push the limits of could Klay Thompson hit 15 threes tonight? Could he get to 70? So this was kind of the perfect game where it was close throughout. Obviously, they needed all 50 of those points from Banchero. But we're already seeing early in the season, why so many people were making a point. It felt like every draft, every auction I was in, when Paolo Banchero's name came up, especially in auctions, it was just a bidding war to the point that I had to back out because people want this guy in their fantasy teams so badly this year. that they're willing to ultimately overpay for a guy who might be worth it, but it just shows, kind of where his standing is in the league right now. I will say though, Brandon, the one thing I'm a little worried about, Banchero's shooting 63% at the line so far. Small sample, but he's taken a lot
Right.
through these first 4 games. I know that's never been a major strength of his, but that's something I was hoping would kind of straighten out, as he gets deeper into his career.
As good as he is offensively, I think his shot still has a lot of work to do. It's not a natural shooting motion. And I think that shows up. He puts a lot of work in terms of his moves in the mid-range, and he's gotten better early on in terms of three-point shooting. So in terms of game flow, I think he's a better shooter now than he has been the last couple of years, but it is still showing up at the free throw line.
Well, he gets the LeBron comparisons, and rightfully so. And
did you see the stat on that, by the way, last night?
Which one?
The only players in NBA history to record 50 points, 10 rebounds, and 5 assists in a game before turning 22 is Paolo and LeBron. So that rightfully so.
It makes sense. I mean, the body comparison obviously is kind of 1-to-1. I still think LeBron is a higher level athlete, especially at that age.
Paolo's not as
right.
I think Paolo really is a good blend, and this is, I mean, you overhype a guy after he scores 50.
Right.
I hear too many comparisons to Carmelo Anthony. I think Paolo is a better and more physical athlete than Melo, and I don't think he's he's not nearly the shooter that Melo was.
Yeah. He's somewhere in the middle of those two. Like he's not going to have LeBron's career. He's not, and I think he could be a better overall player than Melo. Although I think we do forget like how nasty Melo was, and also the fact that Melo played like the first half of his career at a time when scoring was pretty down, and guys weren't taking that many threes. Like I think if Melo had come along 10 years later, he would have been probably an even better fit for the NBA. We saw like his peak years in New York, and he kind of wasted half of his career playing early 2000s basketball for the Nuggets. But no, I mean, this goes back to the point of like, I think part of the comparison with Banchero's his shot is a little LeBron-like too, where LeBron's is very, very mechanical. It's kind of very arm-based. It's not a pure shot. Like you watch LeBron over the years, he rattles in a lot of shots. You don't see Steph Curry rattling in free throws or rattling in threes. I think Banchero has a little bit of that.
Well, I mean, Steph is on a different planet, first of all, but Steph practices as if it hits the rim, it's a miss. And so he's practiced that. That's not made up. That's real.
Right.
That's how Steph preps himself. But this one you'll also like because you're a big early 2000s NBA fan. So we were obviously tracking, is Paolo going to break the Orlando Magic single game record? And so I had to look that up mid game just to provide a refresher and be credible when reporting on that. And it won't surprise you that Tracy McGrady holds the Magic record, 62 points in a game, did that back in 2004. Yep. But Paolo, so he didn't get there, but Paolo became the 7th. It was the 7th time a Magic player had scored at least 50 in a game. Would you like to guess how many times T-Mac lands on that 7? So it's not 7 different players. It's 7 times a Magic player has scored 50 or more. T-Mac is on there more than once.
I'll say he accounted for 5.
You were close. It was 4. 4 times T-Mac did it. That's how special he was as an offensive talent. So
he was nasty. Was that 6? I feel like I remember watching that game, and this is going to sound crazy, but like I was a ridiculously like big T-Mac fan.
Right. I remember you saying that.
Yeah. If I think I've said this on the pod before, but like I was like suspiciously into Tracy McGrady as a kid. Was that against the Wizards? The 62 pointer?
It was. Do you remember the day, Savant?
No, I'm not a savant by any means. I specifically remember watching that game with my friend, also named Nick, and I was like, I like forced him to watch this. Like we had like a sleepover, and I'm like, we need to watch this game. And of course, T-Mac goes for 62. But anyway, that's enough Magic talk.
Well done by you. Gilbert Arenas also scored 40 in that game, for what it's worth, but that kind of gets buried in all of this.
Of course he did. Ex Magic Gilbert Arenas.
Those were not bright days. I did bump into him at a Bahama Breeze, though. He seemed very happy to collect his paycheck in Orlando. Big injury last night, by the way. I still haven't watched it. I don't know if you have. Taylor Hendricks, his leg snaps in half for the Utah Jazz, officially called a fractured right fibula and dislocated ankle. We've seen enough of those in the football world to kind of know what that looks like if you haven't seen it yet. I feel awful for him. He was finally getting some run in the starting lineup. Your thoughts on the injury and who pops up in his place? And did you watch it?
Okay, so I did reluctantly. I absolutely hate stuff like this. I do not watch these type of things. I accidentally saw it on Twitter. It was all over if you're on NBA Twitter, of course. And I didn't really know what I was walking into. It just said like Taylor Hendricks goes down. And I was like, oh, what happened here? Wouldn't recommend watching it. Stuff like this is why I very rarely play pickup basketball anymore, because if this can happen to an NBA player, it could certainly happen to me. I don't know what the heck happened here. Like, this was total non-contact. Like, he was just kind of jogging down the floor.
So weird.
And it's not an exaggeration to say his leg just snapped, which is exactly what happened. Bent the wrong way. I mean, you could see, I think it was Walker Kessler was kind of next to him, and he looks at him and just kind of goes like, oh my God, like what the heck? And like had to like run away from the play. It's bad. It's bad. I mean, it wasn't quite Kevin Ware, Louisville bad, where there was no bone sticking out, thankfully. But if you don't like injury videos, I would not recommend watching it. He's obviously going to miss extended time, could be the whole season. In terms of who steps up, I mean, we got kind of a half game sample, and this was a relatively close game against the Dallas Mavericks, close enough that I think it wasn't like full on garbage time. I don't know that there's an obvious replacement here. It's like I guess maybe we see John Collins move into the starting lineup. Maybe you see a little bit more of the rookie Kyle Filipowski, but a lot of the bench pieces that Utah has been using are guards, right? Bryce Sensabaugh, Patty Mills, Jordan Clarkson. Maybe we see more Cody Williams, who in theory can kind of slide up and play the 4, although to me he's more of a 3 and could maybe play some 2 as well. So it's not a team that has a ton of depth at the 4 specifically. I think they were going to rely on Taylor Hendricks for pretty big minutes, but obviously, he's a drop right now, and I would say Collins has to be the primary guy who benefits. He only played 19 minutes last night, but did have 5 fouls, so that was a part of it.
If we see Taylor Hendricks again this year after the way that this injury has been described, I will be stunned. So, yeah, to say he is a drop is the understatement of the day. Scottie Barnes went back to the locker room in the fourth quarter. He took an elbow from Nikola Jokic. They play again on Wednesday against Charlotte. Any concern over Scottie in the head injury?
A little bit, yeah. I mean, I have Scottie Barnes in a few leagues, including my most important league, which is weekly lineups. So I'm really hoping that if he does miss time, it's only one game. I was actually watching that game pretty closely last night. Toronto should have won, by the way, in regulation, and not having Barnes out there at the end, I think did really cost them. But yeah, it didn't look that bad to me at first. It was kind of a contested thing where I couldn't tell if it was Pirtle or Jokic who got him. It's not like he took like a hard elbow or anything. Kind of looked like more it was like a scratch to his eye. So he'll be day to day. But Barnes looked good last night. 21, 12, and 9. Got off to a really hot start. It was close to a triple double by halftime. 5 steals as well for Scottie Barnes. But tough loss for Toronto. Big win for Denver. I mean, they were down 15 early in the fourth quarter, and a nice rally by the Nuggets to force overtime, and ultimately Nikola Jokic pulling them across the finish line. But a lot of concerns for Denver. I think on paper we looked at this team and you're like, you're relying a lot on young guys. You're asking a lot of Jamal Murray, who has not really looked that great, over the summer and towards the end of last year. And I think a lot of those concerns have already come to roost.
A lot of people were down on the Nuggets. I was one of them going into the season. It took them an overtime effort to take down the Raptors' first win of the season for the Nuggets. So they definitely have some concerns there. I mean, Jokic going for 40 and 10, that's kind of what he's going to do, but you got to get help elsewhere. I meant to ask, by the way, with the first week of the fantasy season in the books, we're on to week 2 now. In general, how do you feel like the teams are looking for you and the guys you drafted?
They're looking okay. They're looking okay. I would say on balance, more good than bad. The RotoWire Stake League is the one that I care most about. And, I opted to build around Giannis in that league, 16-team category league. I got a good deal on Giannis in the auction. It's just, I'm already in last place in free throw percentage. Giannis is taking 12 free throws and he's hitting them at 55%. It's been worse than I hoped it would be so far. And, I loaded up on some other really good free throw shooters, Zach LaVine, Lauri Markkanen, Fred VanVleet, Buddy Hield, guys like that, to try to offset it. And it's just not working because Giannis is taking so many free throws. So, I think I'm in 5th in that league right now to 16, which is fine, but obviously way too early to really get a full gauge on that. We're going to need Buddy Hield to play like he did those first 2 games of the season, more so than the Warriors' last couple of games. But overall, I'm feeling good. What about you?
I feel okay. I could use some more points. I thought I've centered the I'm not going to break down every roster. But my big league, I've centered the team around Wembanyama. It was the second overall pick, and
Okay.
he got back on track this last game, but week one performances just kind of left a lot to be desired. And areas where I needed more scoring and I needed more blocks, and I'm kind of counting on him to provide those numbers, but got off to a little bit of a slow start. But I because you sort of laughed at it, rightfully so. I overdrafted the hell out of Peyton Pritchard this year, and that's worked out great so far. So. We're looking good.
Look, as a Bucks fan, that was just devastating, right? It's like 8 of 12 from 3. I hope you started him this week. My goodness.
I did.
28, 6 and 3 with 2 steals last night. It's like Milwaukee's bench just could not do anything last night. It's like, Bobby Portis, 4 points, Pat Connaughton, 5 points, and then this, random white man for the Boston Celtics is giving them 28 on a night when you hold Tatum to 15 points. And the Celtics are just a well-oiled machine, man. I thought Milwaukee, played about as well as they could to keep that game close, through 3 quarters. But Celtics are a wagon. I think it's the best top to bottom roster I think that's been constructed certainly since the Durant Warriors. And I think you could argue depth-wise that Boston maybe has a little bit more. I mean, they're doing this obviously without Kristaps Porzingis. There is still a massive gap between the Celtics team and everybody else.
Yeah. Thankfully for me in the league that I'm talking about, the benches are really shallow and you set your lineup every day. So
that's nice. Okay.
You kind of, you can't really take a victory lap if you start a guy, because if he's playing, you kind of have to start him. It's on the nights where there's a full slate where there's decisions to be made. But for the most part, there's so many starters in this league. You're just kind of throwing everybody with a pulse in there. Jay Huff is going to get plenty of run the remainder of the week. So make sure, give him a call, let him know to be ready for that one. Let's talk about some ranking risers and fallers. I guess he could be one of them. I got 3 names that I want to list off here. Feel free to throw anybody else into the chat. And also a reminder for you listening and watching this to throw your questions in the comments. We'll get to those, as many as we can, to wrap up today's episode. Draymond Green feels like a big faller. Has the old man hit the cliff? His first 3 games, 4.3 points per game, 4.3 rebounds, 3 assists, shooting 44% from the field, just not getting it done.
Yeah, the Warriors in general have been a tough team to evaluate because they're using this deep rotation. Steve Kerr's insisting that they want to continue to use a deep rotation. We'll see. I think that's all well and good. When you're blowing the doors off of Portland and Utah, it's pretty easy to play everybody. But when you're in a close game, as they will likely be in a lot more of those going forward, I think, playing Steph Curry 26 minutes, playing Draymond 20 minutes, like that becomes a lot more difficult. I wouldn't panic quite yet. I mean, I'm not a huge Draymond guy when it comes to fantasy anyway. I've been burned on that in the past, but he's a guy whose numbers have certainly declined over the last couple of years. He went from 8 to 9 assists per game a few years ago down to closer to 6.5 and then 6 last year. I think it's just a slow start, as far as the assist numbers go. 2, 4, and 3 so far through 3 games. I think he will be closer to 5 or 6 per game. He's given you steals, at least. He had a couple of blocks on opening night. But the Warriors are a work in progress, and it certainly doesn't help Draymond that Curry's going to miss a little bit of time here. He's going to miss at least their next 2 games. They have a back-to-back, I believe, tonight and Wednesday against the Pelicans. So Curry going to miss both of those games. Could be back over the weekend. They're going to evaluate him on Friday. But, any game that Steph Curry's not out there really, really impacts Draymond. And I think just from a pure assist perspective, the absence of Klay Thompson is certainly not a plus either. I know he wasn't the same player last year that he'd been during his peak years. But, part of what makes Draymond is setting up those 2 guys.
For sure. And they've spent a career setting each other up. And now he's looking around going, who the hell are these guys? But I think you're on the right track as far as the drop off of Draymond Green has been a slow and steady dive. So this isn't like we have these guys that just drop off out of nowhere. This is not the case. Really, ever since Draymond punched Jordan Poole, it seems like he's been on the decline. Wendell Carter Jr., one of my guys, 4 straight games to start the season, double-digit rebounds in each one of those, and he's shooting pretty well, averaging over 3 attempts from deep per game. Is he a riser for you?
I think he has to be, based on where he was being drafted, which was not very high. It kind of felt like he was one of those guys that, you'd maybe reluctally take late in the draft. You're like, I guess I need another center. I don't really feel great about Wendell Carter. He's always hurt. His role's always kind of all over the place. I mean, his composite ADP was 161. I mean, that means he's going undrafted in a decent amount of leagues. And Yahoo, he was going in the early 140s. In underdog best balls, he was going in the 180s, which is kind of crazy. But yeah, he's got double-digit rebounds in every game. He had a double-double last night against Indiana. 3-point shooting has been relatively low volume, but at least he's taken them. He only has 1 block so far, but he has 5 steals. I wouldn't say he's like this massive riser where you're looking back and being like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I didn't take Wendell Carter, but it's been a good start.
For sure, and it doesn't seem like it's going away. I think people are just sort of bored by him. He's not a dazzling player, and there was some confusion about how the Magic would handle their big man rotation, but he's a clear starter. A guy that a lot of people were high on coming into the season, Zach Edey, not exactly ROI stuff that we've seen so far. It's still early, but he's kind of the dinosaur that a lot of people thought he would be when he was at Purdue, and then all of a sudden it's like all of us NBA analysts just forgot about that take and left it at the door. And here we go. He's limited to 17 minutes per game. Jay Huff has become the 7-footer of note for this team. He's got to be a faller at this point. I don't know how you keep him in your lineup.
Yeah, big time faller so far, unfortunately. And, it's been the total opposite of what we saw in the preseason, where I loved what I saw from Edey. They were making a point to feed him in the post. It wasn't just, all right, well, we'll throw you a couple lobs and, maybe we'll give you a post touch here and there. Like, they were kind of working things through Edey, and that's evaporated a little bit, during the regular season so far. And obviously foul trouble, what was the big issue through the first 3 games. I mean, he had 14 fouls in like 50 total minutes. And then last night, against Chicago, Memphis, had a huge lead, ended up blowing that one. They lose 126-123. Marcus Smart, by the way, 0 of 11 from the field, 0 of 8 from 3. He was a big issue with no John Morant last night. And Zach Edey still only played 14 minutes despite picking up 1 foul. I know maybe it's not a great matchup with a guy like Vucevic who can step out and shoot. I mean, he was 4 of 8 from beyond the arc last night. So I think that's something to keep in mind with Edey. And Alex did a good job kind of executing this on the pod yesterday, which is, like in a weekly lineup league, it's going to be tough until we know exactly what the patterns are with Edey, because I think when they face a team that has a more mobile center, a guy who, you don't really want Edey chasing around the perimeter, it's going to be an issue, right? And, I was watching that Utah game in the opener last week, and there was somebody together a compilation of Edey just getting beat on back cuts and, kind of being out of position. So there's going to be a bit of a learning curve here. And I would say, it's only been 4 games. I'm still pretty optimistic. Should be in a good spot tomorrow against the Brooklyn Nets. But yeah, it's been a disappointment, especially the way his ADP was getting pushed up in the final week of draft season.
Is there anybody else that you want to bring up in regards to risers or fallers? Obviously, we could spend an hour and a half on this, but just a name or two that comes to mind before we keep on moving.
Yeah, I mean, it's so early that you don't want to label anybody like a bad pick or an incredible pick quite yet. I'm already having some Anthony Davis FOMO. We know this with Davis. It's not surprising the way he's played, but I mean, he's been the best player in fantasy so far. I mean, he is just unreal when he's at full strength. It's just a matter of how long can he remain that way. I'm also having some Evan Mobley FOMO. He's looked really, really good. We were talking about him yesterday as 13-1. Most improved player. Cleveland just looks like a wagon right now. They won last night again against the New York Knicks, although they've had a very easy schedule so far. And I think you got to hand it to Austin Reeves, who's looked really good as well. We're like 4 games into the year, and he's currently a first round value. Obviously, that will not sustain, but he's been off to a great start. And then one guy who's been a hit for me, who I took a chance on in a couple leagues, is Zach LaVine. And again, you're just kind of waiting for the injury. We'll see how many games he plays, but really, really strong start for LaVine. I think he had like 2 points midway through the second quarter last night and ended up finishing with 30.
Yeah, and on the Lakers front, this JJ Redick experiment is working out a whole lot better than people thought.
Oh, yeah.
He's the offense, and it's not just LeBron and AD playing well. The offense is so fluid, their motions, the way they're getting guys open. Yep. It's clear that he put in a lot of work to be ready for the start of the season. We'll see how it maintains. Coaches tend to catch up with other coaches, but love what I'm seeing so far from the Lakers across the board in terms of their stars and their coaching. We'll get to your questions in a moment. We've got a 4-game slate that we want to talk about tonight as well. But right now, let's kick it over to Nick for some thoughts on DraftKings Pick 6.
We're thrilled to be partnering up with DraftKings Pick 6 this NBA season. And we still got a little time before opening night, but plenty of NFL options available over at Pick 6. Really been enjoying playing there each and every weekend. Think a certain quarterback will throw for more than 300 yards. How about your favorite receiver scoring a touchdown? Check out Pick Six, the newest way to play fantasy football and win cash with DraftKings. Here's how it works. Just pick 2 to 6 players of the same sport and choose if they'll have more or less of a given stat. For football, we're talking yards, catches, touchdowns, etc. Lock in your picks and compete against opponents for a shot to win huge cash prizes. Download the all-new DraftKings Pick Six app right now and use our code ROTOPICK. That's ROTOPICK, ROTOPICK. For new Pick Six customers, play at least $5, get $50 in Pick Six credits guaranteed. Again, that code is ROTOPICK. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org in Connecticut. Must be 18 plus. Age and eligibility restrictions vary by jurisdiction. Pick Six not available everywhere, including New York and Ontario. Void where prohibited. See terms at picksix.draftkings.com/promos.
Great stuff right there from Nick Whalen. We get you right back to, just every time I hear that, I can't run to the app fast enough. Well done, as always.
Hey, love DraftKings Pick Six, man. Been playing on there for NFL, been doing it for NBA so far. In the state of Wisconsin, sports gambling is not fully legal, so that's where DraftKings Pick Six comes in, man. If you're in a state like Wisconsin, it's been fantastic. We do have some huge news, by the way, that just came across. Rudy Gay has officially retired, Brandon.
I thought that already happened. Is that new news?
So did I. He did not play at all last year. He was with the Warriors, I think, for training camp last year and then got cut. So Rudy Gay officially calling it a career.
Wow. That felt like that ended 10 years ago, but shout out to Rudy Gay for putting it together.
Yeah.
The number 8 overall pick in 2006 out of UConn. He played over 1,100 games in the NBA. So, hey, he put together quite a life for himself in the league. Shout out to Rudy Gay. Enjoy your retirement, my friend. More action in front of us tonight. Let's talk about some of these matchups and games. 4 games tonight. Nuggets at Nets, Mavs at T-Wolves. That's the TNT Spotlight game, a rematch of the postseason last year. Kings, Jazz, and the Pelicans at the Warriors. No Steph Curry still in that one. You've got 3 of these teams are on the second night of a back-to-back. The Nuggets off an overtime win against the Raptors last night. The Mavs won by 8 against Utah. It was sort of a struggle to get there. Kings off of a 3-point win over the Portland Trailblazers. So those are your back-to-back squads to keep an eye on. Some questions here I want to tee up for you. Cam Thomas, 5th in the league in points per game with 30. He plays again tonight against the Nuggets. Kind of a tight spread. Obviously, a back-to-back is part of that, but still it feels like there's a big gap between these two teams. So I'm curious about that one. But does that hold for Cam Thomas?
Honestly, I think it should. The volume is 100% going to be there. If you watch the Nets at all, it's been the Cam Thomas and Dennis Schroeder show, again, those are your only 2 options, really. They've been kind of going light on Nick Claxton's minutes, been gradually bumping him up. He missed some time in the preseason, so he'll play a bigger role. I believe they'll be without Ben Simmons tonight, who, believe it or not, is dealing with some sort of back issue. So they're load managing him. Yes, 4 games into the year. But no, I mean, we've seen Cam Thomas do it against Atlanta, Orlando, Milwaukee, right? Like, this is a pretty reasonable sample so far as a kind of a variety of different levels of defense, different levels of competition. He's going to take 20 to 25 shots most nights. He's going to take, somewhere between like 7 and 13 3-pointers most nights. He's already getting to the line at a really high rate. He's got 19 free throw attempts over the last 2 games alone. He's giving you rebounds. He's giving you some steals as well. For as much of a chucker as Cam Thomas is, I think he would identify as a chucker. He shoots a good percentage. He takes a ton of really tough shots, and he's still, 44, 45% from the field. He's a very, very good free throw shooter, which helps you a ton in category leagues. And shot 38, 36% from 3 over the last 2 years. He's off to a really good start as a 3-point shooter this year. He's at like 46%. So obviously that'll come down a little bit, but no, I think it's transferable, right? I mean, this is kind of what we expected Cam Thomas to be doing. This is why you had to pay a premium for Cam Thomas in drafts. I think there's honestly a reasonable chance that he'll be a top 5 to 7 scorer in terms of points per game this season.
Yeah, I know there's some sharp bettors out there that took him to to lead the league in scoring this year, and it's well within his range, especially with the confidence that he has shooting the ball. I got to see him up close and personal in Orlando for the home opener for the Magic. It felt like he missed his first 6 shots, and the confidence you would just never be able to tell. He's not the kind of guy that misses some shots and then it hangs his head and feels bad about himself. He just keeps shooting, unconscious, and he will always find his numbers.
He does not have a conscience. He does not. And that is a good thing as far as fantasy goes. I'm not sure it's going to be a good thing for the Nets winning games.
Right.
They also don't want to win games. So it's kind of a perfect marriage.
So it feels like pretty obviously the Mavs and the T-Wolves is the best game on the night. Is that the one that intrigues you the most, or are you league passing this one tonight?
Oh, we're league passing it, baby. I've watched the Timberwolves a few times already. I haven't watched a ton of Mavericks yet, so that'll be on one TV. No football tonight, no baseball tonight either, I believe. Right? Do we have?
No, we have
World Series game 4? Oh, it is.
Yep.
Okay, I thought that was Wednesday. All right. Well, we'll have.
No, we have tough decisions to make, and at the Kravitz household, we're now into the show Penguin. I don't know why I thought it was a good idea to start a series in October, but I felt like I needed to give some time back to the wife, and so this was my way of doing it. And now it's like tonight's the off night, yet we have these games in the World Series. I don't know. It's like you can't watch TV in October.
Well, I'm a 3 TV household, so we should be able to go TNT game on one, World Series on one, and then League Pass on the other. It's nice 4-game slate here after 11 last night. So yeah, obviously we'll be dialed in on Mavs Wolves, but I'm like you, man. Anybody who plays fantasy, it's like you watch games that you have fantasy interest in, and I love watching like a Kings Jazz game. That's just as exciting to me as Mavericks Timberwolves. I love watching this Kings team. DeRozan's been a really nice fit. They've struggled a little bit. I thought they would come out to a bit of a hotter start. I thought they were like 11.5 point favorites last night, over Portland. That ended up being a close game. And obviously very interested to see what the Warriors look like without Steph Curry. Pelicans are only 1.5 point favorites on the road. I know Golden State, has looked good so far this year for the most part, but I mean, this is a team that obviously runs through Stephen Curry. There's always been a huge drop off whenever he doesn't play. And it's worth noting that Andrew Wiggins, as of right now, is questionable as well. And Wiggins has played really well to begin the year. So if they're down Curry and Wiggins, I think this has to be a good spot for New Orleans.
So our local book in Florida, Hard Rock Bet, which is the only legal sports book in the state. So we're just sort of like, we're like you guys, but we're like one small step ahead, an important step. But they locked that one up. It's probably, if I were to look now, available, but I don't want to get lost on my phone. I think for exactly that reason, I'm looking to take the under in that game, 217.5, because the Warriors offense without Curry torpedoes, but I don't necessarily want to bet the Pelicans because their offense hasn't been good either. So if the Warriors are able to defend at home, then this is just going to be a low scoring, ugly game to end the night.
I think you're right. I think there's a pretty good chance. I mean, Zion's not off to a great start. Like CJ McCollum has been fantastic so far. He's certainly benefited from the injury to DeJounte on opening night. Herb Jones hasn't really given them a whole lot. Obviously, they're waiting for Trey Murphy to get back as well. So I think that's a decent call. I mean, 217.5 is a very low number in today's NBA. It's the lowest total on the board tonight, but you're right. I think there's a pretty good chance, Golden State struggles. I'm more curious to like who picks up the slack, right? It's like, do we see the Brandon Pajemski takeoff game? Do we see, the Jonathan Kuminga takeoff game? We were getting a lot of questions on the pod yesterday. Like, do I drop Jonathan Kuminga?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think you can do that just yet. And tonight will be a good test because he should be. He's got a chance to be their leading scorer tonight. One final note, and then we'll get to the bounce and answer your questions. Luka 5 of 22 last night from the field, and that was against a bad Utah team. Now they go into Minnesota, second night of a back-to-back. I think this could be another. I always sort of shudder at fading Luka, but put out the RotoWire picks video today for DraftKings Pick 6, and I went under on 46.5 points plus rebounds plus assists. So I don't know that I can watch it. If I take an under on a player as good as Luka, I kind of have to look away. Yeah. But your thoughts on that and his ability to bounce back tonight?
I think he bounces back. I mean, it's just poor shooting against Utah. You can get away with that, of course, against the Jazz. Mavericks still won that game by 8, despite Doncic going 5 of 22, 1 of 9 from beyond the arc. Luckily, Kyrie Irving comes through with 23. Klay Thompson was good last night. In that playoff series against Minnesota, Luka averaged 33, 10, and 8. So he can do it against everybody, right? I mean, there are certain guys where you say, Minnesota, that's a tough matchup. I think maybe I would back away. Luka is like, he's like Justin Jefferson to me. Like he is matchup proof.
Yeah, you're probably right. This one's not going to end well for me, but put it out there. We'll see what happens. Let's get to the bounce. All right, this is when we tee up your questions. I'll throw them Nick's way, and then we will be on our merry way. Let's start with Donovan Clingan. Question here from Christian. Is Donovan Clingan a hold in 12 to 14 team category leagues?
In a 14-team league, I think I would try to hold him. In a 12-team league, that's a little more difficult. He's basically averaging 12 minutes per game. That's certainly on the low end. We were hoping, maybe closer to like 16 to 18. But Portland's just not really been that competitive so far. I mean, the closest game of the year by far was last night, and Clingan still only played 12 minutes in that game. They're rolling with Ayton. They're going to get Rob Williams back allegedly sometime soon, and I do think there's a chance they at least want to showcase him as a potential trade chip at some point. So I think there will be a point this season where if you do drop him now, you'd be like, oh man, I wish I had him, but that might not come until like March. It's just you have to be blocking an insane amount of shots, which Clingan is doing. Like per minute, the blocks numbers look good, the rebounds numbers look good, but if he's locked into 12 to 14 minutes every night, you can't hold that. In a 12-team league, there are too many other good players out there who you're able to stream in and at least replicate that production, if not, exceed it pretty vastly. 14-team league, it becomes a little iffier, but yeah, it's tough. There are a few rookies like that. It's like Reed Shepard's off to a slow start in minutes wise. Guys that we felt really good about, guys who are doing well per minute. But again, if you're playing 13 minutes most nights, and that's where Clingan's been, right? We have 4-game sample and he's not playing very much. So yeah, unfortunately, I would say in a 12-teamer for sure, you're probably dropping him.
Yeah, these rookies have been bad. Alex Sarr starting to pick it up a little bit, but no surprise, in one of the worst draft classes we've ever seen, the rookies aren't stepping up. So I think
Reed Shepard played 3 minutes last night, man. Like he's barely even in the rotation,
which is crazy. He looked so good. And I know it's summer league, I know it's preseason, but he looked like he was ready to go. Shelby concurs. She says, drop Donovan Clingan. We talked about this one a little bit earlier, but it is a big story. Who gets Taylor Hendricks minutes and productions is one from Carlo. Looks like it's going to be Collins.
Yeah, I think John Collins really benefits here. He probably starts, like we said earlier. There's not a ton of depth at the 4 spot specifically for Utah. It is more of a guard and wing heavy bench. So again, maybe we see a little bit more Kyle Filipowski. We probably see a little bit more Cody Williams. I think Bryce Sensabaugh is a guy that you can kind of play any position. He played 13 minutes last night, didn't really do anything, essentially put up a Tony Snell. And he's only 6'5". I know they are comfortable kind of moving him around, but he's not really a true 4 by any means. So there's not an obvious like 1-to-1, go pick up this guy because Taylor Hendricks is out. But John Collins should benefit most.
This is an interesting one here. Are you guys still holding on to Brandon Miller? This one from Josie17. I think, how do you move off of him? Such a talented player, but he has not been putting it together just yet. And LaMelo looks great. So it's not like the Hornets aren't playing well. It's just this has not been a good early start to the season for Brandon Miller. I would hold.
Well, yeah, I mean, he's played 11 minutes. He's missed the last 2 games. He's not dealing with anything that appears to be overly long term. I mean, given the level of investment, like I love Brandon Miller. Like he was on my list of guys I wish I had more of. And obviously it's unfortunate that he gets hurt in the second quarter of the opener, but he's going to be reevaluated later this week. Who knows? Hopefully this doesn't become a Mark Williams situation where they just push it back, and all of a sudden it's been a month. But I don't get the sense that this is anything overly serious. Obviously, he's IR eligible right now. So if you have an IR spot, just throw him in there. If you want to try to trade him, I guess that's one thing. I still wouldn't do that, but I'm definitely not dropping it. Do not drop it.
Jonas Valanciunas question from Chris G. Is he a drop in a 9-cat league? Doesn't seem like he's getting enough minutes to be fantasy relevant. He's been okay.
This one is tough. I mean, it's just classic Wizards behavior here. You bring in Valanciunas. We're all like, all right, why now for this team? Like, what are you trying to do here exactly? He at least started last night against the Hawks after coming off the bench in the first 2 games. So I would try to see it through. I mean, he's given you high-level rebounding the last 2 games. He's never been a shot blocker, so you shouldn't expect a whole lot there. But yeah, he's playing like 20 to 22 minutes. I thought that would be closer to 26 to 28. The whole idea of bringing in Valanciunas is you're trying to raise your floor. You're trying to be a little bit more competitive. I mean, they did get a win last night over Atlanta, but if you watch the Wizards, I mean, it's been the Poole and Kuzma show, as you'd expect. They combined for like 40 field goal attempts last night. Koulibaly's actually looked pretty good. Corey Kispert had a nice game off the bench. Bob Carrington as well. They're just, they're not featuring Jonas Valanciunas. Not that many teams do. But yeah, it's been a disappointment. I guess for me, if I had Valanciunas, I don't really have him in many leagues, but if I did, I would probably hold him through this week, see where the minutes go now that he is back in the starting lineup. But yeah, it's been disappointing, no question.
Well, and if the minutes pick up, he's going to average 10 rebounds per game. And
right.
I mean, he's almost there now, and he's not even getting 25 minutes per.
Yeah, he's one of those guys where it's like, you just got to be realistic about what the production is going to look like. And, he's 2 years removed from averaging 24 minutes per game and giving you 14 and 10, with good field goal percentage, good free throw shooter for a big man. So I wouldn't panic after 3 games quite yet. If we're still in the same spot a week or two from now, then yeah, maybe you move on.
Peter wants to know, should we sell high on Jordan Poole? We've seen 26-point outing in his last game, 226, 2 of the 3 games so far, 26-point outings for Jordan Poole. Are you in or out? I mean, he's knocking down threes. He's shooting 62% from 3-point range right now.
I'm in, man. I'm in. I was kind of beating that drum, throughout the off season as far as, somebody who, his reputation is horrible right now. He kind of got off to like a 2-month run of just Shaqtin' a Fool plays to begin last year, but was quietly pretty good over the second half of the season. Like his fantasy finish ended up being a lot higher than you would think, especially in category leagues where, you're really worried about the 3-point production. I mean, he's going to take like 9 threes a game. He's been excellent as far as steals go so far this year. He's got multiple steals in every game. He's given you about 5 assists per game as well. If you want to sell high, if you can get somebody more dependable, somebody on a better team, somebody that doesn't have, shutdown risk, I would try to cash it in. But no, I think Jordan Poole is going to be sustainable, man. Like there is a disconnect here as far as his real life reputation, his real life effectiveness versus how good he is in fantasy. So, I mean, he was somebody I actually wanted on my teams.
Andrew wants to know, trying to get Scottie Barnes for Jalen, Suggs, and Shadon Sharp. Is this a dumb trade?
I mean, if you can get Barnes for those two, you absolutely do it. 100%.
Yeah.
100%. I wouldn't, if I had Barnes, I would not entertain that deal. I know Suggs is off to a really good start. I like him a lot. Shadon Sharp's a total wild card, a guy who's had a ton of injury risk, has been injured already this year. More of a, what could this guy be type of situation. And you're really kind of pinning it on those 10 games at the end of 2 seasons ago when he looked really good. But even once he's back, there's a lot of mouths to feed in Portland as far as bad teams go. If you could get Scottie Barnes for that package, you should 100% act on that.
Yeah, I'm with Nick on that, especially after he got knocked in the head. Maybe his trade value goes down for a day or so. Somebody asked here, do you think I should trade DeAndre Ayton for Karl Anthony Towns? I mean, yes.
If you're able to do that, absolutely. Yeah, I know Towns has been, it's just a little clunky so far. Is how I would describe this Knicks season. He's coming off a rough game, but the Cavaliers are a brutal matchup for any big man, especially Towns. When you have 2 options you can throw at him in Jared Allen and Evan Mobley, who's one of the 5 best big man defenders in the NBA right now. I would 100% like the Towns side of that deal if you can do it.
All right, let's wrap with the Twins. I'm seeing some questions roll in. Legendary analyst, great handle, by the way. Ausar Thompson, it's just Ausar Thompson ? And another one saying, what should we do with his brother Amin Thompson with the Houston Rockets? So are we, I know Ausar is still dealing with an injury right now, but what do you see as far as that goes?
I don't know, man. I mean, he's dealing with like a blood clot issue. There's really been no update. They're kind of taking it game to game. If you're holding Ausar Thompson, I mean, I'm okay dropping him, especially in shallower leagues, because we have no idea when he's going to be available. Situations like that are impossible to predict. And, the Pistons beefed up their depth for better or for worse this offseason. Obviously you bring in Tobias Harris, Tim Hardaway's playing big minutes for them. Malik Beasley is going to be a guy who's out there. He put up a nice 1 of 12 from the field last night against Miami. Maybe once Ausar is available, he probably cuts into the minutes for Fontecchio and Holland, but I think they still want to get a look at both of those guys. So I'm not super optimistic on him. And, Amen Thompson's been playing plenty of minutes. He's averaging, over 20 minutes a game so far in Houston through these first 4 games. struggling a little bit with the shot. Did hit a 3 last night. We like to see that, for a guy who's, I actually think his shooting form looks better this year than it did during his rookie season. But you're really in it for the defensive stats when it comes to Amen. And he has 1 steal and 2 blocks so far in like 90 total minutes. So a little bit of a concerning start for him. And you never know with that Houston rotation. They have so many pieces that, on a night-to-night basis, you never know exactly how that's going to shake out. So, I mean, both of those guys to me are droppable right now. I certainly feel better about Amen because he's on the court and healthy and seemingly, locked into that 20 minutes a night. But it's not quite enough where, especially in a weekly lineup league, you're just, throwing him out there unless it's a 4-game week or you have a bunch of guys on 2-game weeks. So he's somebody, if he's like your final bench player, I wouldn't mind shuffling him out.
We'll cap it there. Keep in mind, RotoWire Fantasy Basketball Podcast, this one that you were watching or listening to right now, 4 episodes per week. Do you have a best bet before we get out of here? You on something?
I feel like I might be walking into a trap here, but I'm going to take New Orleans tonight at Golden State. You could get them as 1.5 point favorites right now. Golden State again. It hasn't like it's not just the Curry show so far. These blowouts that they had to start the year. It's not like it was Curry putting up 40. Like they've gotten well-rounded contributions. But I think this is a team that whenever Curry's not out there, you really, really struggles. I like your call on the under. It's actually down 0.5 point already since we talked about it. Now 217 at the DK
lines.
Sportsbook. But I'll be on the Pelicans tonight, and I keep trusting this Kings team as well. I know they haven't looked great so far, but I would lean Kings on the road in Utah.
Yeah, Warriors Pelicans under is definitely going to be a play tonight. I'm reluctantly taking under on 46.5 points, rebounds, and assists on Luka, but I think my best bet tonight is Jordan Hawkins over 2.5 made threes. You get that at plus 135 right now.
Ooh.
He is sniping right now, 53% from 3-point range, and they need offense, so why not let this guy shoot?
He's playing a ton of minutes. Too. I mean, he's played 28, 29, and 34 minutes through their first 3 games. So, yeah, getting that at plus money is a great deal.
That's going to do it for us this week on the RotoWire Fantasy Basketball Podcast presented by DraftKings Pick 6. I've been your host, Brandon Kravitz. He's Nick Whalen, and we'll see you back here next week.